He was a tech mogul, cold and disillusioned with love, who saw everyone as mere cogs in his empire. She, his invisible secretary, with her plain glasses and genuine innocence, harbored a virgin soul and a dreamy heart. On a crucial business trip, an unexpected crisis forces him to lower his guard, and he sees her not just as an employee, but as a woman. In an accidental touch, her purity strikes him like a lightning bolt. Arthur's cynicism is shattered, and the invisible secretary reveals herself to him as a rare soul, the only one capable of healing his hardened heart. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised. If you enjoy love stories and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing, Emily adjusted her glasses for the third time in 5 minutes, trying to ignore the butterflies in her stomach that always fluttered when she had to enter Arthur Vance's office. At 25, she had learned to become almost invisible in the hallways of Vance Tech, a sprawling American tech giant that occupied 3 entire floors of the most modern building in downtown Manhattan. Her discreet gray suit, hair always pulled back in a neat bun, and reserved demeanor made her go unnoticed by almost everyone, exactly as she preferred. Born into a modest family in Queens, Emily had earned her position as the CEO's personal secretary through hard work and dedication. Every penny of her salary was carefully divided between the bills for the small apartment she shared with her widowed mother and younger brother, who was studying engineering thanks to her sacrifices. There was no room for luxuries or frivolities in her life, only responsibilities and the unwavering determination to keep her family together. On the other side of the reinforced glass door, Arthur Vance reviewed the third quarter numbers with the sharp gaze that made his competitors tremble. At 37, he had transformed a small startup into a tech empire, but the success had come at a price. After the devastating betrayal of his ex-fiancée, who had tried to sell company secrets to a rival, Arthur had built high walls around his heart. To him, people were motivated only by self-interest, and trust was a luxury that a man in his position couldn't afford. Emily took a deep breath before knocking lightly on the door. Arthur's deep, impatient voice authorized her to enter. "Mr. Vance, the merger contracts with Global Tech have arrived. I've also scheduled your meeting with the Japanese investors for tomorrow at 9, and Emily spoke in a professional tone as she organized the documents on the desk, her movements precise and efficient. Arthur barely glanced up from the reports. To him, Emily was just another cog in the corporate machine. Competent, yes, but completely replaceable. He didn't even really remember what she looked like. Her presence was so discreet that she had become part of the furniture. "Cancel my afternoon schedule. I need to focus on the presentation for the Japanese," he said without looking at her. "I've already cancelled it, sir. And I also asked the IT department to do a final check on the presentation system." Arthur finally raised his eyes, slightly surprised by the anticipation. Emily was already heading towards the door when her cell phone rang. It was Maria, her neighbor. "Emily, you need to come quick. Your mother fainted and is being taken to the hospital." The phone slipped from Emily's trembling hands, crashing to the marble floor with a bang. Her face paled instantly, and she leaned against the wall to keep from falling. Arthur observed the sudden transformation with growing curiosity. The secretary, always so controlled, seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. I need to go," Emily murmured, trying to gather the pieces of the broken phone with trembling hands. "My mother. Hospital." For the first time in years, Arthur rose from his chair because of an employee. There was something in Emily's raw vulnerability that pierced his armor of indifference. "Johnson is in the garage. He can take you," he said, surprising himself with the offer. Emily stared at him with teary eyes, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. In that moment, Arthur truly saw her, not the efficient secretary, but the woman behind the professional facade. He saw the genuine fear, the family devotion, and a fragility that awakened something long dormant in his chest. "Thank you," she whispered, And for the first time in 3 years of working together, their eyes truly met. Arthur watched Emily rush through the company hallways, and a strange unease settled in his chest. Unable to concentrate on work, he decided to go to the hospital himself to check on her, a decision that would completely change the course of their lives. Arthur parked his silver Mercedes in front of St. Luke's Hospital, still mentally questioning what the hell he was doing there. In 15 years of business career, he had never visited an employee in the hospital, but something in Emily's desperate expression had disturbed him in a way he couldn't explain. He found her in the emergency room hallway, sitting in a blue plastic chair, still wearing the same grey suit from the office, but now crumpled and stained with tears. She held a cup of cold coffee between her trembling hands, her gaze lost on the white wall in front of her. "How is she?" Arthur asked, approaching cautiously. Emily looked up, clearly surprised to see him there. "Mr. Vance." "What? Why did you come? Answer my question first." "High blood pressure. The doctor said it was stress and lack of proper nutrition. Emily swallowed hard. "She was saving money on food so I could pay for my brother's college." Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. That family devotion, that purity of intentions, was something completely foreign to his world of corporatism and self-interest. "She's going to be okay," he said, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. Emily nodded, trying to hold back the tears. "I'm sorry for running out of the office. I know tomorrow's presentation is crucial, and forget the presentation." She stared at him as if he had spoken in Martian. Arthur Vance never forgot business appointments. Never. But the Japanese investors, I said forget it. Arthur sat down in the chair next to her, ignoring the curious glances of the other people in the waiting room. "When was the last time you ate something?" Emily blinked, confused by the personal question. I don't remember." Without a word, Arthur got up and returned 15 minutes later with a sandwich and an orange juice. He placed them in her lap with a tenderness that contrasted completely with his reputation for coldness. "Eat." "Mr. Vance, I can't accept." "It's not a request, Emily. It's an order." The sound of her name on his lips made her shiver. In 3 years, he had always called her Miss, or simply hadn't addressed her by name. There was something intimate and unsettling in the way he pronounced Emily. As she ate in silence, Arthur observed her discreetly. He noticed for the first time how her brown hair shone under the fluorescent light when it escaped from her bun, how delicate her hands were, despite always being busy with work, how there was a natural and unpretentious beauty that he had never noticed. "Why are you here?" Emily asked finally. Arthur hesitated. He didn't know the answer himself. "You're a valuable employee." But they both knew there was something more. A strange tension had settled between them, an invisible thread that connected them in a way that neither of them could understand. The doctor appeared to discharge Emily's mother, and Arthur insisted on paying all the hospital bills, ignoring her embarrassed protests. Later, he personally drove Emily and her mother home, a small duplex in Queens that contrasted sharply with his penthouse in Tribeca. "Thank you," Emily said when they arrived, "for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay anything." Their eyes met again, and this time neither of them looked away immediately. There was something happening there, something dangerous and inexplicable. The next day, Emily arrived at the office, determined to maintain a professional distance, but Arthur seemed unable to ignore her as before. He made up excuses to call her to his office, watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, and for the first time in years had difficulty concentrating on work. The change did not go unnoticed by the other employees. Brenda McCarthy, the ambitious marketing director who had always been interested in Arthur, immediately noticed the special attention he gave to the secretary. "Interesting how the boss is being solicitous with Emily lately," she commented maliciously to a colleague during lunch. At the end of the afternoon, Emily was organizing the files when Arthur approached her desk. "I need you to accompany me on a business trip to Miami next week. The merger with Global Tech requires my personal presence, and I'll need someone who knows all the details of the contract. Emily felt her heart race. A trip alone with Arthur Vance. The idea was both terrifying and strangely exciting. Of course, Mr. Vance. I'll arrange the reservations. They're already arranged. The flight is Monday at 7 in the morning. As he walked away, Emily realized that her hands were trembling slightly. Something was changing between them, and she didn't know if she was prepared for the consequences of that change. Suddenly, the Fontainebleau Hotel stood majestically against the golden Miami sky, and Emily felt completely out of place walking through its marble lobby beside Arthur. The other guests wore expensive clothes and spoke in hushed tones about multi-million-dollar deals, while she carried her simple suitcase and tried not to trip on the Persian rug. "The suites are on the 14th floor," Arthur informed her as they entered the mirrored elevator. "You're in 1402, I'm in 1405. Emily nodded, avoiding looking at her own infinite reflections on the elevator walls. The forced proximity to Arthur during the flight had been disconcerting. He had insisted on discussing every detail of the merger, but she had noticed how he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. Emily's suite was bigger than her living room at home. A basket of expensive fruit awaited on the coffee table, along with a bottle of champagne that cost more than her weekly salary. She lightly touched the petals of the white roses in the arrangement, wondering how she had ended up in this gilded world that seemed so distant from her reality. A soft knock on the door startled her from her reverie. Arthur was standing in the hallway, having already traded his suit for a white linen shirt and dark pants that made him look younger and less intimidating. "The meeting with the Global Tech executives has been moved up to tonight. We're having dinner with them at the hotel restaurant at 8. Emily looked at the clock. It was only 5 in the afternoon. "I need to review the documents before—" "We already reviewed everything on the plane." Arthur hesitated for a moment. "How about we take a walk on the beach? You seem tense." The suggestion was so unusual that Emily didn't know how to respond. Arthur Vance suggesting a walk on the beach? The man who worked 16 hours a day and considered vacations a waste of time? 20 minutes later, they were walking on the soft sand of South Beach, Emily having traded her high heels for simple sandals. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in years, Arthur wasn't looking at his cell phone. "Had you ever been to Miami before?" he asked, surprising her with the casual conversation. "Once, when I was 12 years old. My mother saved for 2 years to bring me and my brother. We stayed in a small motel in South Beach and ate sandwiches on the beach for 3 days. Emily smiled at the memory. "It was the most wonderful trip of my life." Arthur watched her as she spoke, noticing how her eyes sparkled with the simple recollection. There was a purity in her joy that he had forgotten existed in the world. "And you?" Emily asked, gaining courage. "You must have traveled to incredible places." "Many places, but always for work." Arthur stopped walking, looking out at the ocean. "I've never had a wonderful trip like yours." There was a melancholy in his voice that made Emily turn to study his profile. "Why not?" Arthur was silent for a long moment. Then, as if the words came out without his permission, he said, "My father died when I was 15 years old. He left the company bankrupt and my mother with huge debts. I had to grow up very fast." It was the first personal information he had shared with her, and Emily felt something tighten in her chest. "I'm sorry. I learned early on that I couldn't trust anyone but myself, that people always have ulterior motives." He stared at her. "Until I meet someone who proves me wrong." The air between them seemed charged with electricity. Emily felt her cheeks burn, unsure how to interpret his words. "Mr. Vance." "Arthur. Here, away from the office, you can call me Arthur." The name sounded strange on her lips. When she whispered, "Arthur," they continued walking in silence, but now there was a different intimacy between them. Arthur pointed to a coconut water vendor and insisted on buying one for both of them, laughing when Emily grimaced at the taste. "You have scars," Emily observed, noticing a thin mark on his wrist when he held the coconut. Arthur immediately pulled down his shirt sleeve. "An accident when I was a kid." But Emily realized that wasn't quite it. There was something in his eyes, an old pain he was trying to hide. She had seen similar marks before on a college classmate who had gone through very difficult times. "Arthur," she said softly, "if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm a good listener." He stared at her with an intensity that made her tremble. No one had offered to simply listen to him in years. No one had looked beyond the facade of success to see the wounded man underneath. "You're different, Emily," he said, his voice husky, dangerously different. The dinner with the global tech executives went smoothly, but Emily could barely concentrate on the conversation. She was hyper-aware of Arthur's presence beside her, of the way he occasionally brushed her hand when passing documents, of the lingering glances he gave her when he thought no one was watching. When they returned to the hotel, Arthur walked her to the door of her room. "Thank you for bringing me here," Emily said, "for showing me Miami in a different way. Thank you for reminding me what it's like to see things through pure eyes," he replied. Their eyes met and locked. Arthur took a step forward, and Emily felt her heart race. For a moment it seemed like he was going to kiss her, but then he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Good night, Emily." She entered the room with wobbly legs, leaning against the closed door. On the other side of the hallway, Arthur was doing the same thing, fighting against feelings he hadn't experienced in years, and trying to ignore the fact that he was falling for the only woman who could destroy all his defenses. The early morning in Miami was interrupted by urgent pounding on Emily's door. She awoke confused, her heart pounding, and ran to answer still in her nightgown, a simple white cotton one that her mother had sewn for her. Arthur was on the other side, his face pale and beads of sweat on his forehead, leaning against the doorframe. "Emily, what happened?" "My head. It's a bad migraine. The medicine is in my room, but I can't," he moaned softly, bringing his hand to his temple. "The presentation is in 4 hours. If I can't—" Without hesitating, Emily put her arm around his waist, helping him walk to his suite. Arthur was vulnerable in a way she had never seen him, the powerful CEO reduced to a man who needed care. "Where's the medicine?" she asked, helping him sit on the bed. "Bathroom. Right cabinet." Emily ran to get the medicine, returning with a glass of water. Arthur's hands were trembling so much that she had to help him take the pills, her fingers brushing against his in the process. "You need to lie down in the dark," she said, turning off the lights and closing the heavy curtains. The room was plunged into semi-darkness, only illuminated by the soft light that leaked from the bathroom. Arthur lay down, but continued to moan softly. Emily hesitated for a moment, then sat on the edge of the bed. "My mother always did this when I had a headache," she murmured, beginning to make gentle circular motions on his temples. Arthur sighed, his body relaxing for the first time. "Your hands are magic." In the intimate silence of the dark room, with Emily leaning over him giving the delicate massage, the barriers between them began to crumble. Arthur opened his eyes and saw her, really saw her, in the golden light that came from the bathroom, her loose brown hair falling over her shoulders, the simple nightgown revealing the delicate curve of her neck, her eyes full of genuine concern. "Why do you do this?" he asked, his voice husky. "Do what? Take care of me. You don't get anything out of it." Emily stopped the massage for a moment. Because no one should suffer alone." The simplicity of the answer hit him like a punch. Arthur raised his hand and touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "You have no idea what you do to me," he whispered. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. "Arthur, since that day at the hospital, I can't stop thinking about you. You've invaded my thoughts, my dreams." He propped himself up on his elbow, bringing his face closer to hers. "I try to keep my distance, but it's impossible." "You're my boss," she whispered, but didn't pull away. "Here, in this room, in this moment, I'm just a man who's falling in love with an extraordinary woman." The words were like fire between them. Emily felt tears well up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from a mixture of fear and happiness that she had never experienced. I don't know how, she stammered. Arthur understood immediately. The innocence he had suspected was confirmed there, in front of him, and it hit him with a devastating force. She was pure, untouched, completely different from the calculating women of his world. "Emily," he said, sitting up completely and taking her hands. "Have you ever kissed anyone?" She shook her head, her cheeks red with shame. "I've never had time for those things. I've always taken care of my family, worked." The confession awakened in Arthur a fierce protective instinct and at the same time a desire that consumed him. He wanted to be the first, the only one to touch that pure soul. "May I?" he asked, bringing his face closer to hers. Emily nodded, closing her eyes. The kiss was soft initially, reverent, as if Arthur were touching something sacred. But when she sighed against his lips, something awakened within him. The kiss deepened, his hands tangled in her hair, and she responded with a natural passion that surprised him. When they broke apart, both were breathless. Arthur rested his forehead against hers. "My God, Emily, what have you done to me?" She opened her eyes, and he saw there a mixture of innocence and awakening that almost destroyed him. Before he could control himself, he kissed her again, this time with more urgency. His hands explored her face, her neck, feeling her tremble beneath his touch. Emily was lost in completely new sensations. The smell of Arthur, the taste of his lips, the warmth of his hands on her skin. Everything was overwhelming and perfect at the same time. "Arthur," she moaned when he kissed her neck. The sound of her name on his lips almost made him completely lose control. He pulled away abruptly, breathing heavily. "I need to stop," he said, running his hands through his hair. "If I don't stop now," Emily stared at him, confused and still burning with desire. "Why?" "Because you deserve more than this. You deserve more than just a one-night stand. What if I want to be more than that?" The words came out before she could censor them. Arthur stared at her with an intensity that made her tremble. "Emily, you don't understand. My world is dangerous. There are people who would do anything to destroy me, and if they find out about you..." "What kind of people?" He hesitated, struggling with himself. Then, as if a dam had broken, he said, "Brenda McCarthy, for example. She has connections in the press, rivals who would love to use any scandal against me. And there are other things from my past that could hurt you." "What things?" Arthur got up, walking to the window. The headache was gone, but now he faced a different torment. "When my father died, I didn't just inherit a bankrupt company. I inherited enemies. People who wanted to see us completely destroyed." He turned to her. "At 16, I tried to end it all. The scars you saw weren't from an accident." Emily brought her hand to her mouth, shocked. "Arthur, I survived because I promised myself that I would never be vulnerable again, that I would never let anyone have enough power to destroy me." He stared at her. "But you, Emily, you have that power, and it terrifies me." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Emily got up and walked to him, taking his hands. "I would never hurt you," she said. "Never." "I know. That's why it's so dangerous." They stood there, looking at each other, knowing that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. What had begun as a professional relationship had turned into something that could save them or destroy them. When Emily finally returned to her room, it was almost 5 in the morning. The presentation was in 3 hours, and both knew that their lives had changed forever that morning in Miami. Arthur stood at the window, watching the sun rise over South Beach, knowing that he had given Emily a power over him that he hadn't given anyone since his ex-fiancee's betrayal. And for the first time in years, he was willing to take that risk. The presentation to the global tech executives was a resounding success, but Emily could barely concentrate on the numbers and charts. Her eyes constantly met Arthur's across the conference room, and each exchanged glance made her heart race. The morning kiss had changed everything between them, creating an electric tension that seemed visible to anyone who paid attention. On the flight back to New York, Arthur booked seats in first class and made sure they were alone in the last row. During the 2-hour trip, their hands met accidentally several times, and Emily found herself memorizing every detail of his profile while he pretended to read reports. "We need to talk about what happened," Arthur said as the plane began to land. "I know," Emily replied softly, feeling a mixture of expectation and terror. But when they arrived at the company the following Monday, keeping the secret proved more difficult than they imagined. Arthur became even more attentive to Emily, making up excuses to call her to his office, offering to drive her home when it rained, bringing special coffee for the whole team, but leaving the best one on her desk. Emily, in turn, struggled to maintain her professional composure while her whole body reacted to his presence. Every time Arthur brushed her hand when handing over documents, every time he said her name in that deep voice, she felt her legs weaken. Brenda McCarthy was the first to notice. "Interesting how our CEO is being solicitous lately," she commented to Robert Davis, the CFO, during the executive lunch. "Have you noticed how he looks at the little secretary?" "Brenda, you're imagining things," Robert replied, uncomfortable. "Am I? He's never taken a secretary on a business trip before. And now, suddenly, Emily is indispensable." Brenda took a sip of wine, her eyes gleaming with malice. "A simple girl from Queens. Imagine the scandal if they found out that Arthur Vance is getting involved with an employee." The seed of suspicion planted by Brenda began to grow through the company hallways. Emily's colleagues noticed the changes. How she arrived earlier to fix her hair in the bathroom, how her cheeks turned red when Arthur appeared, how she seemed to float through the hallways. "Emily is different," commented Carol from accounting. "More radiant. Must be a new boyfriend," speculated another colleague. Meanwhile, Emily lived in sweet torment. Arthur had started sending private messages to her cell phone. Never anything compromising, just "good morning" or "hope you slept well," but that made her smile like a love-struck teenager. He had also created pretexts to work late, moments when they were alone in the office and could talk without masks. "Are you happy?" Arthur asked one night, when everyone had already left. They were reviewing contracts, but Emily realized that he had stopped working several minutes ago. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," she confessed, surprising herself with the honesty. Arthur got up and walked to where she was sitting, placing his hands on the desk on either side of her, trapping her there. "Emily, I can't stop thinking about you. About us." "Arthur," she whispered, mesmerized by his proximity. "I know it's complicated. I know I'm putting you in a difficult position, but..." He tilted his face, almost touching her lips. "I'm falling in love with you, completely." Emily closed her eyes, feeling his breath on her skin. "Me too." They almost kissed right there in the office, but the sound of the elevator made them separate quickly. It was just the security guard making his rounds, but the scare reminded them of how dangerous the situation was becoming. "We can't keep going on like this," Arthur said, running his hands through his hair. "If anyone finds out, I know, but I can't stay away from you." Her confession almost destroyed him. Arthur made a decision that would change everything. "Come to dinner with me tomorrow, at my place. We need to talk away from here." Emily nodded, even though she knew she was crossing a dangerous line. The next day, Brenda put her plan into action. She had hired a private investigator, Mark Peterson, specializing in corporate investigations and extramarital scandals. "I want you to follow Arthur Vance," she said at the discreet meeting in a coffee shop in Midtown, "and his secretary, Emily Diaz. There's something going on between them, I'm sure of it." "What kind of evidence are you looking for?" asked Mark, a thin 40-year-old man with an ordinary appearance, perfect for going unnoticed. "Anything that could compromise Arthur. Photos, videos, records of where they go together, especially if they meet outside of work hours." "And what's your interest in this?" Brenda smiled coldly. "Arthur Vance rejected my proposal for a partnership a few months ago. Said I didn't have enough strategic vision. Now I'm going to show him what kind of strategic vision I have." Mark nodded, understanding perfectly. It was another case of corporate revenge disguised as moral concern. That same afternoon, Emily got ready with special care for dinner. She wore the only dress she owned, a simple navy blue one that her mother had sewn for a graduation, let her hair down, and applied a little lipstick. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a different woman, someone who was blossoming under Arthur's loving gaze. Arthur lived in a spectacular penthouse in Tribeca with a panoramic view of the city. When Emily arrived, he had personally prepared an intimate dinner. Grilled salmon, French wine, and candles scattered around the dining room. "You cooked?" she asked, impressed. "I learned when I was younger, before I had money for staff," he said, pulling out the chair for her to sit down. "Emily, I need you to know, this isn't just dinner." "What do you mean?" Arthur sat next to her, taking her hands. "I want you to be my girlfriend, officially. I know it's complicated because of work, but I can't pretend you're just my secretary anymore." Emily felt her heart race. "Arthur, are you sure? People will talk. They'll say I'm taking advantage of the situation." "I don't care what they say. I only care about you." They had dinner, talking about dreams, fears, and plans for the future. Arthur told her more about his difficult childhood, about how he built his empire with his own hands. Emily talked about her sacrifices for her family, about how she had always dreamed of true love, but never believed she could find it. When they finished eating, Arthur led her to the balcony, where the view of the illuminated city stretched to the horizon. "It's beautiful," Emily sighed. "You're beautiful," Arthur said, turning her to face him. "Emily, He couldn't finish the sentence because he kissed her, and this time there was no rush or urgency. It was a slow, deep kiss, full of promises. Emily melted into his arms, finally feeling at home. Across the street, hidden in the shadows, Mark Peterson photographed everything with a professional telescopic lens. The flash was off, but the camera perfectly captured the romantic scene on the illuminated balcony. "Jackpot," he muttered, checking the images on the viewfinder. The photos clearly showed Arthur and Emily in an intimate embrace, kissing passionately on his penthouse balcony. It was exactly what Brenda wanted. When Emily finally returned home that night, Arthur insisted on driving her personally. She was floating with happiness. She didn't imagine that the photos were already being sent to Brenda, nor that a scandal was being carefully orchestrated to destroy the happiness she had just found. Arthur, alone in his penthouse, looked at the city through the balcony window where he had kissed Emily. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. But a strange unease consumed him. The feeling that something was about to go wrong, as always happened when he finally found something good in his life. For 2 weeks, Emily lived what she believed was a fairy tale. Arthur had become more affectionate and attentive, finding creative ways to spend time with her without arousing suspicion. Discreet dinners in out-of-the-way restaurants, late-night walks through the city, sweet messages that made her smile throughout the day. She had discovered a side of Arthur that no one else knew, gentle, vulnerable, deeply in love. Emily's happiness was so evident that even her mother commented on the different glow in her eyes. "You're radiant, my daughter. Have you met someone special?" Emily brushed it off, but couldn't hide her smile. She couldn't tell the truth yet, but she felt that it would soon be possible. Arthur had mentioned the possibility of making the relationship public when the time was right. At the company, however, Brenda McCarthy was executing her plan with surgical precision. The photos of Mark Peterson were just the beginning. She had discovered intimate details about Emily's life, her humble origins, the financial situation of her family, even records of her grades at the public college she had attended. "Perfect," Brenda murmured, reviewing the dossier she had compiled. A poor and inexperienced little secretary who took advantage of the millionaire boss's vulnerability. "The press is going to love this story." Brenda had strategic contacts, journalists specializing in corporate scandals and gossip columnists who lived on gossip about the rich and powerful. But before handing the story over to the media, she decided to use the information directly against Arthur. It was a Thursday when she knocked on his office door. Arthur was reviewing financial reports, but his mood had improved drastically in recent weeks. Emily had left a special coffee on his desk with a discreet note. "Hope your day is wonderful. E. I need to talk to you about a delicate matter," Brenda said, closing the door behind her. Arthur looked up, immediately alert. He had known Brenda for years and knew how to recognize when she was plotting something. "What is it about?" Brenda sat elegantly in the chair in front of his desk and placed a brown folder on the glass top. "It's about your reputation, Arthur, and the future of Vance Tech." Arthur opened the folder and felt the blood run cold in his veins. The first images clearly showed him and Emily on his penthouse balcony, kissing passionately. There were also photos of them entering and leaving restaurants, walking hand in hand through deserted squares, embracing in the seat of his car. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have evidence that you are having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee, a virgin and inexperienced secretary that you are clearly exploiting." Arthur closed the folder forcefully. "You don't know anything about my personal life. I know more than you think, than you imagine." Brenda opened another folder, this one full of documents. Emily Diaz, 25 years old, born in Queens, low-income family. Never had a serious boyfriend, never been seen with men before you appeared in her life. It's obvious that she's being manipulated by your power and money. You're delusional. Am I? Then let's see how the press interprets these photos. How the investors will react when they find out that the CEO of Vance Tech is abusing his position to seduce vulnerable employees. Brenda leaned forward. Imagine the headlines. Tycoon exploits virgin secretary. Predatory CEO takes advantage of innocent employee. Arthur felt a murderous rage rise in his throat. "What do you want?" "I want the vice presidency of the company. And I want you to end this charade with Emily immediately." "And if I refuse?" Brenda smiled coldly. "Then tomorrow morning these photos will be on the front page of every newspaper in New York. Your company will lose millions in market value, investors will flee in panic, and your precious Emily will be publicly humiliated as the secretary who sold herself to the boss." Arthur clenched his fists. "You're a viper. I'm a businesswoman. And you have 1 hour to decide." After Brenda left, Arthur was alone in his office, looking at the photos that documented the happiest moments of his life. Each image was a stab. Emily laughing as he kissed her, the two walking embraced under the light of the lampposts, the loving look she gave him during an intimate dinner. He knew Brenda wasn't bluffing. He knew the journalists she had mentioned, knew how they would distort the story to sell more copies. Emily would be portrayed as an opportunist, or worse, as a naive victim of a powerful and unscrupulous man. Arthur thought of all the possibilities: facing the scandal, making the relationship public, fighting the accusations. But with each scenario he imagined, he saw Emily being torn apart by the cruel media. She had no experience to deal with the brutal exposure that would come. Her family would be harassed, her reputation destroyed, her life turned into a hell. The most painful decision of his life was made out of love. Emily was organizing documents when Arthur called her to his office. She entered smiling, as she always did lately, but the smile died when she saw his expression. "Sit down," Arthur said without looking at her. "Did something happen?" Emily asked, her heart beginning to race for the wrong reasons. Arthur was silent for a long moment, fighting against every fiber of his being. Then in the coldest voice he could muster, he said, "I need you to understand that what happened between us was a mistake." Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "What? You're my employee, I'm your boss. I let the situation get out of control, and it can't continue." "Arthur, I don't understand. Yesterday you said you loved me. Yesterday I was confused." Arthur forced himself to meet her eyes, seeing the growing pain there. "You're a good secretary, Emily, but that's all it can be between us." Emily got up, her legs wobbly. "You're not serious." Not after everything we've been through. I'm completely serious. Arthur forced himself to continue, each word being a torture. You're young, inexperienced. You confused gratitude with something more. I should have been clearer from the start. Tears began to stream down Emily's face. Gratitude? You think everything I felt for you was gratitude? Yes. The lie almost killed him, and it was irresponsible of me not to clarify that sooner. Emily stared at him for a long moment, searching for some sign of the man who had kissed her so tenderly, who had whispered words of love in her ears. But all she saw was the cold mask of the ruthless CEO. I offered myself to you, she whispered, her voice broken. I gave you everything I had to give, and you're telling me it was all nothing? Arthur looked away, unable to sustain the pain he saw in her eyes. I'm sorry if you misinterpreted my intentions. Emily recoiled as if she had been slapped. The humiliation was so intense that she could barely breathe. The only thing she could do was turn and run out of the office, ignoring the curious glances of the other employees as she passed through the hallway with tears streaming down her face. Arthur was alone in his office, destroyed. Through the window, he saw Emily running out of the building, clearly distraught. Every instinct screamed at him to run after her, explain the truth, protect her in the only way he knew how. But when he looked at the photos scattered on his desk, he knew he had made the right decision, even if it was the most painful of his life. Emily was safe now, free from the scandal that would destroy him, and consequently destroy her too. Brenda appeared at the door a few hours later, smiling victoriously. I heard Emily quit, she said. A wise decision. Arthur stared at her with a hatred she had never seen before. You got what you wanted. Now get out of my sight. We still need to discuss my promotion. You won't get any promotion. In fact, you're fired. Brenda paled. You can't do that. I have the photos, and I have better lawyers than yours. If you try to use those photos against me, I'll destroy you in every way possible. Arthur got up, radiating a deadly coldness. Get out of my company and my life before I change my mind about not prosecuting you for blackmail. Brenda left furious, but Arthur didn't even notice. He was looking out the window, searching for a sign of Emily in the busy streets of New York, knowing that he had lost the only truly precious thing in his life to protect her from a world that didn't deserve her. Emily arrived home, shattered, unable to explain to her worried mother what had happened. She locked herself in her room and cried until she had no more tears, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world for having believed that a man like Arthur Vance could really love her. 3 weeks had passed since Emily had left Vance Tech, and each day was a battle against the depression that threatened to consume her. She had found a new job as a secretary in a small law office, but the salary was much lower, forcing her to make drastic savings. Worse than the financial situation was the constant pain in her chest, the feeling that a part of herself had died that terrible day in Arthur's office. Her mother, Mrs. Diaz, watched her daughter wither with growing concern. Emily had lost weight, lost the sparkle in her eyes, and become a shadow of the vibrant woman she was a month ago. Honey, you need to tell me what happened, Mrs. Diaz said one morning, holding Emily's hands as they had coffee. It's not just the job change. There's something more. Emily looked away, unable to confess that she had fallen hopelessly in love with her boss and that he had discarded her as if she were nothing. The humiliation was still too fresh, too painful. It was just professional disappointment, Mom. I thought I could grow in the company, but I was wrong. Mrs. Diaz didn't believe the explanation, but respected her daughter's silence. Meanwhile, Arthur had become an even darker version of himself. The company functioned automatically under his mechanical leadership, but anyone who knew him well could see that something had broken within him. He worked late, avoided social events, and fired 2 temporary secretaries because none could organize his office the way Emily did. It was Robert Davis, the CFO, and one of Arthur's few true friends, who decided to intervene. He had noticed the drastic change in the CEO's behavior, especially after Emily's sudden departure and Brenda McCarthy's mysterious dismissal. "Arthur, I need to talk to you," Robert said one Friday night, entering the office where Arthur was still working at 10 o'clock. "If it's about the global tech reports, leave it for Monday." "It's not about work. It's about you." Robert sat in the chair in front of the desk. "You're a wreck, man, and don't tell me it's just tiredness." Arthur stopped typing and looked at his friend. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the fact that you've turned into a zombie since Emily left. And it's no coincidence that this happened in the same week that you fired Brenda." Arthur stiffened. "Emily's departure has nothing to do with me." "Yes, it does. And I know because Carol from accounting told me that you were different with her in the weeks before she left." Robert leaned forward. "Arthur, what really happened?" For a moment, Arthur considered telling him everything. Robert was discreet, loyal, one of the few he could trust. But the pain was still too intense, and admitting that he had lost Emily would make the wound even more real. "There's nothing to tell." Robert sighed, frustrated. He had known Arthur long enough to know when he was lying. Across town, Emily was having her own revelation. She had gone to the supermarket to shop when she ran into Carol, her former colleague from Vance Tech. "Emily, long time no see." Carol hugged her enthusiastically. "How are you? Are you liking the new job?" "I'm fine," Emily lied, forcing a smile. "That's good. You're greatly missed at the company, you know. Arthur is impossible since you left. He's already fired 2 secretaries. Emily felt a pang in her chest at hearing his name. "He's always been demanding." Demanding is one thing, but he's different. He barely speaks to anyone, works late every day, seems like he's suffering about something. Carol lowered her voice. "We even commented that it might be because of you that he's like this." "Because of me?" Emily tried to appear disinterested, but her heart raced. "It's just that in the weeks before you left, he was different with you, more attentive. We thought you guys had something going on." Emily changed the subject quickly and said goodbye to Carol, but the words of her former colleague kept echoing in her mind. If Arthur was really suffering, why had he been so cruel to her? Why had he said that it was all just a misunderstanding? The answer began to emerge a few days later, when Emily was having lunch alone at a diner near her new job. 2 women at the next table were talking in low voices, but loud enough for her to hear. "Did you hear about Brenda McCarthy? She was fired from Vance Tech on the same day that secretary quit." "Brenda? But she was well positioned there. What happened?" "No one knows for sure, but I heard that she tried to blackmail Arthur Vance with something. They say she had compromising photos of him." Emily almost choked on her sandwich. Brenda McCarthy. She remembered the marketing director, always elegant and ambitious, who looked at Arthur with ill-disguised interest. Compromising photos? Of what kind? Oh, you know how those powerful men are. They always have their secret affairs. But it seems that this time someone documented everything. Emily felt her stomach churn. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. What if Arthur hadn't broken up with her out of cruelty, but out of protection? What if someone had found out about them and blackmailed him? That night, Emily made a decision that would change everything. She would find out the truth, even if it meant facing her own wounds. She started discreetly, calling contacts she still had at Vance Tech, asking casual questions about the latest events at the company. She found out that Brenda had been fired for violation of ethical conduct, but no one knew specific details. It was then that Emily remembered Mark Peterson. She had seen his name on a contact list of Brenda's a few months ago when she was organizing files. A quick search on the internet revealed that he was a private investigator specializing in corporate investigations. Emily knew she was entering dangerous territory, but the need to know the truth was stronger than the fear. She used her savings to hire Mark for a few hours, making up a story about suspecting that an ex-boyfriend was being blackmailed. "Brenda McCarthy hired me a few weeks ago to follow Arthur Vance," confirmed Mark when they met in a discreet cafe. "She wanted evidence of an extramarital affair." Emily's heart raced. And did you find it? I did. Photos of Vance with a young woman. Brunette, beautiful. They seemed very much in love. Mark studied her carefully. The woman was you, wasn't it? Emily nodded, her hands trembling. What did Brenda do with the photos? She used them to blackmail Vance. She wanted a promotion, and for him to end the relationship. I imagine it worked, since she was fired soon after. The revelation hit Emily like a lightning bolt. Arthur hadn't broken up with her out of cruelty or indifference. He had been forced to choose between protecting her from a public scandal and maintaining the relationship. And he had chosen to protect her, even if it meant destroying his own heart. Do you have copies of the photos? Emily asked. Mark hesitated. I do, but I need them. And I need everything you know about what Brenda planned to do if Arthur didn't give in to the blackmail. When Emily left the cafe an hour later, she had in her hands not only the photos that documented her love for Arthur, but also evidence of Brenda's threats. Recordings of telephone conversations where she talked about destroying Arthur's reputation and publicly humiliating the little secretary. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a flame ignite in her chest. It wasn't just relief at discovering the truth. It was determination. Arthur had sacrificed his happiness to protect her, but now she had the weapons to protect them both. Brenda McCarthy had underestimated Emily Diaz. The inexperienced little secretary was about to show that true love was stronger than any blackmail. That night, Emily began to plan her revenge. Not a cruel revenge, but a just one. She would expose Brenda publicly, clear Arthur's name, and if she was lucky, win back the man she loved. But first, she needed allies, and she knew exactly who to look for. Emily spent the night planning every detail. In the morning, she called Robert Davis, remembering how he had always been kind to her at the company. Robert, it's Emily Diaz, Arthur's former secretary. I really need to talk to you about something important. Robert was surprised, but agreed to meet her at a cafe near Vance Tech. When Emily showed him the evidence she had collected, the photos, Brenda's recordings, Mark Peterson's testimony, he was shocked. My God, Emily, Brenda really blackmailed Arthur. Robert examined the documents in disbelief. And he broke up with you to protect you? He chose my safety over our happiness, Emily said, her voice choked, and I need your help to fix this. Robert didn't hesitate. What do you need me to do? Emily's plan was simple, but effective. Robert would organize an emergency meeting of the company's board of directors for that afternoon, under the guise of discussing serious ethical issues involving corporate blackmail. Emily would attend as a witness, bringing all the evidence against Brenda. Meanwhile, Emily made a call to her mother. Mom, I need to tell you the truth about what happened at my previous job. Mrs. Diaz listened to the whole story attentively. The love for Arthur, Brenda's blackmail, his sacrifice to protect her. When Emily finished, her mother hugged her tightly. My brave daughter, Mrs. Diaz whispered. Go there and fight for your love. At 3 p.m, Emily was standing in front of the Vance Tech building, wearing her best suit, the same navy blue one she had worn on her first date with Arthur in Miami. She took a deep breath and entered. The meeting room was full when Robert announced her. Arthur, who had not been informed about her presence, paled when he saw her enter. Their eyes met for a moment, and Emily saw there all the pain and love he had tried to hide. Gentlemen, Robert began, I brought Miss Emily Diaz to clarify a serious situation that has affected our company recently. Emily placed the evidence on the table with steady hands, despite her racing heart. 3 weeks ago, I was an indirect victim of blackmail orchestrated by Brenda McCarthy against Mr. Arthur Vance. A murmur ran through the room. Arthur tried to stand up. Emily, you don't have to. I do, yes. She stared at him directly. I have to. Because an upright man was forced to make an impossible decision because of the unbridled ambition of an unscrupulous person. Emily told the whole story, showing the photos, playing the recordings where Brenda talked about destroying Arthur publicly. She explained how Arthur had been blackmailed into ending the relationship they had, and how she had discovered the truth. "Arthur Vance did not abuse his position," declared Emily, her voice clear and firm. "He fell in love genuinely, reciprocated in the same way. And when he was threatened, he chose to protect me instead of protecting himself. This is not the behavior of a predator. It's the behavior of an honorable man." The silence in the room was absolute. Arthur looked at her as if he were seeing an angel. His brave Emily, facing a room full of powerful executives to defend his honor. "I resigned from my job because I believed that Arthur had played with my feelings," continued Emily. "Today I found out that he sacrificed our happiness to protect me from a scandal that I didn't even know existed. And I'm here to say that I don't need protection when it comes to fighting for true love." One of the board members spoke up. "Miss Diaz, we understand that there was blackmail, and that is serious. But still, a relationship between superior and subordinate." "We are no longer superior and subordinate," interrupted Emily. "I no longer work here. I am a free woman, in love with a free man, and no one has the right to interfere with that." Arthur could no longer contain himself. He stood up from his chair and walked to her. "Emily." "No," she said, raising her hand. "Let me finish." She turned to the board. "Brenda McCarthy tried to destroy Arthur, using our love as a weapon. She calculated that he would choose to protect me, and she was right. But she underestimated one thing, that I would discover the truth and come back to fight." Emily finally looked directly at Arthur. "You told me once that I was dangerously different. You were right. I'm different because I don't give up on the people I love. I'm different because I believe that true love is worth any risk." Arthur felt tears burning his eyes. "Emily, you protected me when I didn't even know I needed protection. Now it's my turn to protect you." She turned to the board. "Arthur Vance is the most upright man I know. If you punish him for being a victim of blackmail, for choosing to protect someone he loves, then this company doesn't deserve to have him as its leader." The chairman of the board, a 60-year-old man named Edward Mendez, stood up. "Miss Diaz, after hearing your testimony and analyzing this evidence, it is clear that Arthur was a victim, not an aggressor. But we still need to discuss the implications." "With all due respect," interrupted Emily, "the only implications that matter are these. Brenda McCarthy tried to destroy a good man and will be prosecuted for blackmail. Arthur Vance has proven once again why he is the best CEO this company has ever had. And She took a deep breath. "I am here to say publicly that I love Arthur Vance, and I don't care who knows it." Arthur could no longer control himself. He crossed the room in 2 steps and held Emily's face between his hands. "You're amazing," he whispered. "Completely amazing." "I'm yours if you still want me," she replied. "I always wanted you. I never stopped wanting you." Arthur kissed her right there in front of the entire board, a kiss full of love, relief, and promises. When they broke apart, Edward Mendez was smiling. "Well, I think it's settled. Arthur, you have our full support. And Miss Diaz, if you ever want to come back to work with us, in a suitable position, of course, you will be very welcome." 2 months later, Emily was standing on the terrace of Arthur's penthouse, wearing a simple but elegant white dress that he had insisted on buying for her. It was Saturday night, and the city of New York stretched out illuminated at her feet. "Are you sure about this?" Arthur asked, approaching from behind and wrapping his arms around her. "Won't you miss the simple life?" Emily turned in his arms, smiling. "My life has never been simple, Arthur, but now, with you, it's complete." Arthur had formalized the relationship publicly, facing the press and the comments with the same determination he used in business. Emily, in turn, had gone back to school, this time doing an MBA that Arthur insisted on paying for, preparing to eventually work at the company in a position of true leadership. "I love you," Arthur said, kissing her neck. "I love you for your courage, your purity, your strength. I love you for fighting for us when I was ready to give up. And I love you for protecting me even when it meant hurting yourself, Emily replied. I love you for teaching me that I'm worthy of being loved like this, completely. Brenda McCarthy had been prosecuted and convicted for blackmail, having to pay a heavy fine and her reputation destroyed in the corporate world. Mark Peterson, in exchange for not being prosecuted as an accomplice, had provided all the necessary evidence. But more important than legal justice was the justice of the heart. Arthur and Emily had found in each other something they didn't even know they were looking for. A love that overcame social differences, external pressures, and attempts at sabotage. You know what impresses me most about you, Arthur said, turning Emily to face him. What? You transformed your innocence into strength, your purity into courage. You proved that it's possible to be genuine and powerful at the same time. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. And you taught me that I can trust in love, that I can be vulnerable without being weak. They stood there, embraced under the stars of New York, two hearts that had found their home in each other. The invisible secretary had become the most important woman in the life of the most powerful man she knew. And the lonely tycoon had discovered that true power was in loving and being loved without reservations. Months later, when Arthur proposed to Emily during a trip back to Miami, in the same hotel where it had all begun, she said yes, without hesitation. Not because he was rich or powerful, but because he was the man who had chosen to protect her even at the cost of his own happiness, and who had found in her not only a woman to love, but a partner for life. Their story proved that true love knows no barriers, neither of class, nor of experience, nor of power, and that when two souls recognize each other, no external force is able to separate them permanently. Love, in the end, always wins.